Hey everybody, welcome to Skype a Scientist Live. This is Museum Week. So we've partnered up with the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles, and we're super pumped because we've got three really cool and different sessions this week. We've got photographs and wildlife in LA today, and then we're doing maritime societies on Wednesday, and then we're doing shark jaws and fish jaws and all sorts of other fish things on Thursday. Same time every day, which is 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we're excited. It's going to be great. So with that, what else do we have to say? Only ask your questions once, because otherwise it's a little bit hard to parse through the questions. And also, if you can support our program, that would mean so much to us. We're totally donor supported. So please do so at patreon.com/SkypeAScientist or paypal.me/SkypeAScientist. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, so all of those donations are tax deductible. So with that, I'll hand it over to Miguel, and then we'll go from there. Thanks for being on with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm going to introduce you to my work and a little bit about my background, because I know there's a lot of students out there who might benefit from hearing about how I kind of became a wildlife biologist and what I do at the museum. It's a very diverse field, being a museum professional, so hopefully you get a little snapshot into my area of expertise, which is community science. I'm a manager in the community science office. So I'm going to share a little bit about my background, just a few slides. And let's see here. There we go. Hopefully this is visible to everybody. So that's me. I grew up in Los Angeles, and a city kid. My mom and I moved to an area near Griffith Park, which is famous for the Hollywood sign, the Griffith Observatory, and we moved there because it was a safer neighborhood. Not so much because she knew about all the nature out there. My family didn't know anything about science or nature, but she is a very supportive mother, and she did what she could. She knew I liked animals, and so she took me to the Natural History Museum of LA County, where I work today. And I was really inspired by the dioramas that are featured in the halls, which are basically scenes from different parts of the world where animals live. And they depicted some beautiful scenes of very famous species like lions and elephants. And it just really transported myself mentally to those places. But the message I got from those museums and even the zoo was that wildlife is out there, they need our help, we need to conserve them, but it's not really here in the city. So maybe this career studying animals in the wild isn't really for me unless I can get out of here and study wildlife where they live, which I thought at that point was not in the city. I wasn't the best student in high school, but my mom enrolled me in a student volunteer program at the zoo because she knew that I just needed to do something that motivated me. And so I did this program at the LA Zoo that allowed me to work, study on weekends with zoo educators and curators and learn about wildlife education and conservation being done at zoos. That was really inspiring. But I really would have benefited from more environmental education at a young age, knowing about what local nature lived around me and plants. And even though I was really close to nature at all times, had coyotes running through my neighborhood, I really didn't make the connection. I really didn't take it more than wildlife. Some animals are here, but how do they coexist? Do we need to coexist with them? Do they belong here? What's their importance to us? Those types of simple answers. And even what species live around me? Those are simple questions that any kid should be able to answer. So then I went to Africa in college and got my feet wet in wildlife research. It was my senior year in college. So I don't recommend waiting to your senior year in college to get experience in whatever you want to do. But that's kind of how I ended up getting immersed into this field. I was able to map wildlife like giraffes in unprotected areas that were in between two national parks, just to see how they were interacting and coexisting with local community members. I then graduated and scrambled to get experience. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from USC. And then I worked for the USGS, worked really hard during that internship, and they've hired me full time. Then I had opportunity to study bobcats in Irvine, California, of all places, so close to home where I grew up. And this is the first time I learned about bobcats. So having to go through college and then through internships just to find out what was living right under my nose that whole time really kind of put a fire under my belly. I really wanted to let people know that what other animals lived in the city so they can be inspired at a much younger age and not have to wait till they get a graduate degree or a college degree to figure out simple information like that that everybody should have access to. And then let's fast forward. I got a master's degree in ecology at UC Davis, and I specialize on urban carnivore ecology and conservation. And I basically learned out how urban carnivores like mountain lions, gray foxes, coyotes, bobcats were able to coexist with people in the city. How sensitive were certain species more than others? I also had opportunity to study jaguars in Nicaragua, which is where my family is from, in southwestern Nicaragua, seeing how jaguars interacted with the local community there. And then I eventually felt like I need to move on from just doing research, which I was doing for the federal government and for some nonprofits, and do more education. So that's where the Natural History Museum came back into my life. And I'm really grateful for that opportunity because it allowed me to take all these skills and these passions and make sure that other people knew about these career paths, these career opportunities, especially kids that look like me, Latino kids, people of color that knew about these career options, and that if you work hard, you go to school and you follow your passion, that you can do something as a career that you're really passionate about. And so, like I said, I was able to study jaguars in Nicaragua, and then I ended up coming back to my neighborhood that I grew up in Griffith Park, and discovered a mountain lion in that park with a team of biologists. And I discovered the very first photo of a mountain lion there, and his name is P22, which stands for Puma 22. And he is still there. He's been there 8 years now, and he's been an ambassador for urban wildlife, and especially after a National Geographic photo was taken of him, which is pictured on that banner there. It made that story go viral and inspire people from all over the world to think differently about their natural surroundings within the city. And then that top right corner of your screen there is me detecting bats at a USC football game. I'll end with this story because it really kind of captures where I want to go with this field and how I ended up getting into community science. This detector is a little microphone you can put on the top of your phone, and it records the echolocations of bats, which is each bat has a very unique and species-specific call. And because I'm a bat nerd, I had a bat detector in my pocket at a USC football game. And my brother was like, Miguel, there's bats eating moths at the stadium lights. And so I stood up in the middle of the game and started listening to the bats. And I was able to identify the species right then and there, thanks to the technology of that device. But again, sharing these stories is the most rewarding part, not making these species discoveries, but just seeing what these stories mean to people that can relate to those stories. And then community science is what our big focus is right now. We basically are partnering with community members, scientists, professional scientists, are partnering with volunteers of all ages and making amazing discoveries on a regular basis because we're having access to private property that we didn't have access to before, thanks to technology and thanks to the generous support of the community. And so everybody now has a smartphone, it seems like, or some sort of device that allows them to share information with us. And so we ask people to take photos of nature in their backyards, in their personal space, which is especially helpful and relevant now that we're kind of all stuck at home. And basically to prove that nature is literally everywhere. We just haven't been looking like we should have been in the past. And we're making discoveries like, for instance, on the bottom screen, you see some lizards kind of biting each other there. That's a mating ritual that our southern alligator lizards go through. And it was basically only observed less than a handful of times in the wild by professional scientists that know what they're doing. And now we have over 100 observations of this behavior, because now people are crowdsourcing that information to us, which would have been impossible without the help of community scientists, because these animals are in people's backyards where scientists don't have access to. And the picture of that collage of bats you see there are the 12 bat species I've been able to discover with the help of families in the LA area. 12 species of bats. I grew up not even knowing bats lived in LA, and now, thanks to the partnerships we have with families, I've been able to discover 12 bat species using those acoustic detectors. And then I'll wrap up with this story on the bottom, because I know there's a lot of young people out there. This is a 9-year-old at the time. His name was Reese Bernstein. He lived in Chatsworth, California, and he was out in at a barbecue and observed a weird-looking gecko. And he thought, bet geckos don't belong around here, and they're not from LA. And he submitted that to the museum, and it ended up being the first LA County record of a Mediterranean house gecko. So this young boy, just by being observant and sharing that information with us, became a published author at the age of 9 years old, and made this huge discovery just by helping us out. And then the last thing, I just want to give a shout out that there's a city nature challenge going on right now. We're kind of ending the observation period. So go out there and take observations of wildlife using the iNaturalist app. So you basically take a photo like you would for Instagram or Facebook, but that photo, if you use it with the iNaturalist app, will turn that photo into a useful data point, so we can learn about nature all over the city. And at this moment, cities from all over the world, hundreds of cities are participating, all looking for wildlife in their personal spaces. And then there's a period where people are going to help each other identify species. So you don't have to even know what you're photographing. As long as you put it on this app or this platform, people will help you identify species. You'll have conversations with scientists and other community members that will help you out as far as learning about what nature lives right under your nose at all times. So I really want to thank you, and I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions about my career or community science. Thanks again.
Sorry, I muted myself because my cat was screaming in the background. Okay, thank you so much. That was really cool. Jacob would like to know, what's the hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of my job is making what I do easy to understand to people. I see it as, it's kind of hard, but it's a challenge, a fun challenge, to make what I do relevant to people, seem relevant and interesting and understandable to people of all ages and backgrounds. And so my job as a community science manager is to kind of translate that scientific jargon and kind of some formidable barriers that people have between them and science, and make it easy and inviting and seem relevant to people. And I think it's an ongoing process, because you don't know what resonates with everybody at all times, but we do our best, and it's a really fun process.
Awesome. Trevor would like to know, what's the most ferocious animal encounter you've ever seen or personally experienced?
Wow. The ferocious animal encounter. Yes. I think it was once when I was in Africa, sleeping in a tent in the Masai Mara, and we basically had a pride of lions that started taking a rest right next to our campsite, and they were roaring, and they basically had to be shooed away with rangers. They would shoot rifles in the air to scare them away. And so, although we don't know if they were being aggressive, they're just talking to each other. It seemed aggressive, seemed scary at the time, and who knows what would have happened if those rangers weren't there to kind of be a barrier between us and them.
That sounds wild. Jacob would like to know, do you have to be an expert scientist to be good at your job?
No, definitely not. I'm always learning something new, even as a professional scientist. That's the whole point of being a scientist, is kind of challenging yourself, challenging the natural world, and experimenting and seeing what works, what doesn't work. And you're never going to be the perfect scientist. You're never going to know all the answers, because learning answers is what it's all about, and showing people how to go through that process of conducting an experiment, of observing nature, for the purposes of taking that information to the next level and making it useful for our understanding of the natural world. But yeah, so I know people of all ages, including my 3-year-old daughter, who are observing things that I would have observed because they're at a certain level, eye level, and have a certain search image that I don't have. And so, just by being aware, you can be a scientist, and I really encourage that.
Awesome. Laura would like to know, how can students who live in urban areas get involved?
Simply by sharing what you find with a institution that is collecting data. So, or even a platform like iNaturalist, for instance, or eBird. eBird is a similar platform where people submit bird locations, identifications to a website, so people can map where birds are and migratory patterns. iNaturalist is very similar, but it's very photo based. You can take photos of mushrooms to coyotes, and it's all accepted, and it's all counts towards helping us better understand what wildlife distribution is like in LA. So all you have to have is a camera or a camera phone, and submit that information to us, or someone else via email, or iNaturalist is the easiest way. But yeah, or even social media. If you hashtag nature in LA, we'll see it, or email us nature@nhm.org. We'll get it that way as well. But yeah, the easiest way, the more straightforward way, is inaturalist.org, and also there's a free app you can use.
Awesome. Anisha would like to know, if I wanted to become a biologist, what do I have to work really hard at in school?
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't the best at chemistry, at all the sciences that are prerequisites for, or important for, getting a degree. But as long as you're passionate about it, I was fortunately good at memorizing things, and which is good for biology. So biology, having biology courses is important. Chemistry courses are inevitable and part of it. Physics, physical sciences courses. So I'm not saying you have to definitely be an expert at everything, but if you try hard and you let your passion drive you and get you through those difficult times, anybody can do it. Like I said, I wasn't the best at certain sciences, but I knew it was important to get to where I wanted to go, and create a career that I wanted for myself. So yeah, just make sure that you're open to learning those sciences, because at the end of the day, that's what you have to do to get that degree.
Yeah, I was never good at chemistry or math, but I just slogged through to get to
Yeah.
squid. Lillian Thomas would like to know, when things go back to normal, will you be looking for more volunteers to host bat detectors?
Yes, actually, and for this year, we have people already set up, but this is a multi-year project, and we focus on new regions of LA County every single year. We're not exactly sure where we're going to go next year. Probably somewhere along the Los Angeles River, so we can intersect with inner city neighborhoods, and also rural neighborhoods, or less inner city, I guess. And so, yes, we will be looking for more site hosts. And please let us know. You can find us on the NHM website, the Backyard Bats webpage on the nhm.org, and there's contact information there.
Great. Let's see. Conlon would like to know, how do we tell you if we find weird wildlife?
The best way is sending us a photo. For instance, I'm getting probably like 3 emails a day by people who are finding southern alligator lizards mating in their backyards or biting each other. And I'm basically a liaison between the community and our scientist, our herpetologist, who is a biologist that studies reptiles and amphibians. And I'm getting him that data. And so all you have to do is submit it to me. If it's snail mail even, we'll take that. But email is a common way, and iNaturalist is the easiest way and more straightforward way, because iNaturalist will grab the date, time, and location of that photo and give us all that information at one time, which is what we need.
Great. What's your favorite part of your job?
My favorite part of my job is seeing kids roam through the museum that were about my age when I first started walking through the museum, seeing, watching them be equally inspired by the dinosaur halls, which are classic features of any natural history museum, as they are with the LA nature exhibits, like the P22 exhibit or the Nature Lab exhibit, because that means that we're doing our jobs at not just making natural history and nature of the world seem relevant, but making them take pride and see local nature that lives within LA as relevant and important. And I think that's not easy to do, because there's a lot of sexy, interesting animals that are competing with LA wildlife, but people are enamored with our animals, from our local spiders to our famous mountain lions as well.
Great. Jen would like to know, how old do you have to be to volunteer at NHM things?
I believe the age is 16 years old. But you can check our volunteer website, again, on nhm.org, and they'll give you all the guidelines, and there's an online application as well.
Cool. Freya would like to know, is it easy to be a scientist?
Some days, yeah. Those days where you're just out in the field collecting data and everything's going right. But when you're a wildlife biologist, wildlife aren't there to cooperate with you. Sometimes they're not going to be where you think they're going to be, doing what you want them to be doing. And sometimes it's hard to get access to those places. And so there's a lot of barriers sometimes, but once everything works as to plan, according to plan, then everything is really enjoyable, especially if you like to be outdoors and really take that information that you collected outdoors and do something really cool with it once you're back in the office, and look at graphs and trends and some really cool numbers that you collected. And sometimes you collected that with the help of local community members, which makes it even sweeter. And so I think, yeah, for the most part, I would say it's easy as long as you get the training that everybody gets. If you're enjoying what the project is and the question you're asking, then it becomes easy that way. Yeah,
for sure. Olivia would like to know, where can you find bats besides caves and bat houses?
That's a really awesome question. So that's hopefully the next step of our project, because honestly, that is one of those second most common questions we get. First is, are bats dangerous? Are they here? And then second, where are they living once I tell them that they're here? And sometimes they're afraid, sometimes they want to help them. But either way, it's a good question. So underpasses are common places for urban areas, trees, street trees. In LA, we have a bat called the yellow bat that is specialized on palm trees. And so our famous LA palm trees actually are important to that bat. And so, but that what really kind of speaks to kind of how variable their sensitivity to urbanization is. So some need to roost in foliage like trees, and some can basically roost in anything that's dark and small enough for them to feel safe during the day when they're resting. So a crevice in a roof, but it really varies. And so hopefully we can crowdsource that information as the next step of our project by asking people where they're seeing bats emerge at dusk. And we can compile that information and do follow-up visits. But that's the only way to know. And we just don't know yet.
Awesome. Andrew would like to know, with bats in the news a lot right now, are you worried that they'll be stigmatized?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's already happening or happened, which is unfortunate. I think what I keep telling people is that um, the cause of this pandemic is not just because bats are bats and they're just dangerous animals. It's kind of our impact on them and other wildlife, and bringing them together in these really poor conditions called wet markets, where live animals are huddled together from all over the world in really poor conditions alongside hundreds of people in a very humid climate a lot of times, and so that creates a recipe for disaster. And it's not fair to these animals because they didn't choose to be huddled together with all these other species and us. They probably prefer to be left alone, and who knows how impactful this disease would have been if these animals didn't have contact with other species or with us in these very unnatural and unfortunate situations. And so, and also things to notice is that not all bats are carrying this disease. It was a certain type of bat that where it originated, or we think originated from, and the bats are very different from each other. There's about 1,200 species in the world. They're all very different, have different behaviors, adaptations, and geographic distribution. And so some bats will never come in contact with each other and won't have the same natural history, and so makes them a little bit, some species a little bit more I don't know, close in contact with people than others, or have that potential. So yeah.
Cool. Victoria, age 7, would like to know, what's your favorite animal?
That's a good question. Jaguars. I think jaguars are really special to me because I think they're just beautiful animals. They're rosette patterns, but also I think because they're unique as far as cats go. Yeah, tigers and fishing cats like the water too, but jaguars really like the water and do well hunting in the water, and eat a lot of different prey items, are short and stocky, kind of like me, and so that's something that I can really gravitate to, and also because they're native to the Americas, which is and in Nicaragua, where my family's from, so that makes it a personal connection for me too.
Awesome. Sandra would like to know, when did you find out that you were interested in learning about animals?
Uh, from a very young age, honestly, I can't even, as long as I can remember, as soon as I started going to the zoo or watching wildlife documentaries on TV, on PBS and things like that, or having zoo books and checking out zoo books at the library. I think those opportunities really kind of opened my eyes to the beautiful and cool animals all over the world, and really inspired me to want to learn more about them and eventually want to protect them and all that. Yeah.
Cool. Does climate change affect your research?
Um, as far as I know, it hasn't yet, but it may. So, for instance, I study a species, a population of squirrels called the western gray squirrels, who are only native tree squirrels to the LA area, and they need cool climates like oak woodland, dense canyons, a lot of canopy cover. So they have this mycorrhizal fungi that grows in these cool, damp ecosystems for them to survive and do their job and play out their role in the ecosystem. And it's the same for other populations in other mountain ranges in the LA area. And as things get warmer, their little niche, their little climate zone is going to continue to vanish. And that's the same for our flying squirrel population here in the LA area. And so I'm really worried about that. And it hasn't impacted the Western gray squirrel yet, as far as we've noticed, but it's possible that in a short amount of time it will. And that species already is vanishing from the LA area because of urban development in these same areas, and also this non-native species, the fox squirrel, that is basically displacing it from its native range. So, yeah.
Sounds good. Martin would like to know, if you could go back to Africa, what would you study?
Oh, if I went back to Africa, wow, that's such a good question. I'd love to go and study human-wildlife conflict between carnivores and local tribes, but it's a really tough question for me, because even though that's my interest, I don't know if I'd be the best person for that, because I feel like when you do community-based conservation, the most effective work is done by members of those communities. And so I feel like my role would be, even in that case, would be just to help train, give whatever skills I have to community members there, and empower them to take on those types of projects and make an impact in those communities, and be a role model for other community members who can really relate to them, to those leaders that I train. And so that's kind of what I'd like to do. But I really love to focus on those species that are really getting hammered by wildlife trade, poaching, and conflict, like lions and pangolins, things like that. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Max, age 5, would like to know, how many miles per hour can a Jaguar run?
Wow, that's a good question. I believe it's in the 30s, but I have to look that up, honestly. I'm not sure. Very good question.
Amelia, age 6, wants to know, what's the biggest wild animal?
The biggest wild animal is the blue whale. And that's the largest mammal in the world, animal on Earth. And then largest land mammal is the African elephant. And yeah, those are the top two that roam the water and the land, that are the biggest of the biggest.
Cool.
Good question.
How important is the educational background of your job in terms of picking the right major, picking the right college, etc.?
I would say it's important, but not as important as experience. I would say as long as you get a degree in a field that is within the environmental sciences or biological sciences, I think that is enough, as long as you're very ambitious as far as getting experience. I recommend as early as possible. In high school, if you have opportunity to do that, but definitely by the time you start college, start using whatever free time, work study opportunities or internships, summer jobs, to get that experience that you want. I know everybody doesn't know exactly what they want to do, but that's another reason to start sooner than later as far as getting experience, so that once you do know what you want to do, you can start racking up that time. Because the next step after you get your bachelor's degree is getting a graduate degree. And I highly recommend at least getting a master's degree to be competitive nowadays. But the way to get into a graduate program is, at least in my field, ecology and wildlife biology, is by getting a lot of experience under your belt, because those advisors that take you on want to make sure that you can complete your degree and can follow through with a rigorous graduate program in your thesis or dissertation. And so I definitely think the degree is important, but the specificity of your major isn't as important as getting experience. Yeah.
Agreed. What is your strategy to collect data from an animal? Like, how do you even get data from an animal?
Well, I use camera traps. So I forgot to show these off.
Oh, cool.
Motion activated cameras. And they're triggered by motion. A motion sensor is a lens, and they are able to give us information as far as the date, time, and because we know the location of where that animal is found, so we can get information like what time of day they're active in close proximity, in areas that are in close proximity to each other. So let's say I have a camera in a neighborhood, then I have a camera really close by in a park, and I can see how active coyotes are, at what time of night they start coming out in the city versus the park, to see how big of an impact we have on them. So that's one example, and see what connectivity is like. So I can put these on an overpass or a tunnel that goes under or over a freeway to see if animals are using corridors to get through across these really formidable barriers, these freeways. And other scientists, like my colleagues, the old school way, and still to some extent they do it, is collecting actual specimens of animals. So here are an example of 6 of the 12 bat species that call LA home, and you can get a sense of how big bats are in North America compared to other places. Like in India and the Philippines, they have flying foxes, which are much bigger. You probably take most of this case up. But a mastiff bat is our biggest bat species in North America, and it's that big. And has a wingspan of about 2 feet, which is pretty big, but majority of bats are about the size of these other ones here. But anyways, they collect that data to get blood samples, tissue samples, to get to genetics information, to get locality information, so that we can have a database, a library of where animals are, and how they're impacted by different environmental factors. And also I use acoustic detectors. I don't have a microphone on me, but for bats, I use microphones to listen for their species-specific calls. And by using that information, I can, similar to camera traps, know what species are where and what time of day they're active just by their recordings.
If you're in a loud place like a stadium, how does your recorder know, like how does it even parse it out, those noises, like versus the humans versus the bats?
It does that because it has a filter that I scrub it through, a software that once I record that sound, which basically is triggered by a certain frequency range. So bats are communicating, navigating in space, and hunting in space in darkness using echolocation, using sonar, which basically is another word for ultrasonic sound, which is any sound above 20 kilohertz, because we can hear up to 20 kilohertz if we have really good hearing. And so we use that sound and the individual species characteristics to identify different species. And even if we have a marching band right under us or something like that, it's at a lower frequency and it's at a different pattern, even if it does reach those top frequencies, so that we know, even if it's at a high frequency, if it doesn't look like a bat call, which is basically looks like a hockey stick, it's something that we'll probably throw out. And it's easy to do with the great software that's out there.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Let's see. Rachel says, many people live in dense urban areas where there might not be a lot of green space. What tips would you give people who don't know how to look for wildlife in city landscapes?
That's an excellent question. And that's part of my job, is to make people first of all, feel comfortable in nature. A lot of people are told not to get dirty and things like that. So the first step is, understanding that it's okay to get dirty, it's okay to kind of turn over that rock and that log to look for things. And the next step is look for habitat. And habitat is a place where an animal can find shelter, food, or water. And a good place for that could be under a electrical box cover, where it's nice and moist, or irrigation box, for instance, under a bench, under a waste can, under a dumpster, under the shade of a tree, under a log, under a rock, near a pond, near a puddle. All of those areas are unique features within the urban landscape that animals will take advantage of, animals that are able to adapt to the city. And so another tip is change your search image from just looking forward to looking up and down when you're looking for wildlife, because wildlife are all around you. And sometimes, even if you're looking straight at a plant, it can be on the underside of that leaf. And so because it's a little cooler, has a different microclimate under there. And so those are just some general tips, is you just kind of put yourself in their shoes or their feet or paws and think about, what would I need to survive in this area, and where are the water sources, where is the shelter that would make me feel safe from humans, big giants walking around during the day and night. And so that's the first step. And then the next step is how to make those photos count for science. And the way to do that is take multiple angles of animals, if you can, because they're not going to cooperate. They're not models or anything like that that are paid to be there. But take as many angles as you can. Try and stay in focus, and then also just capture the moment. Make sure that if you see an animal, take a photo. Don't try and get that Instagram-friendly shot with the perfect lighting yet. Maybe as a second shot, but just get a photo, because scientists have seen thousands of photos of these animals, and even if it's a little blurry and far away, it's better than not having anything at all. So that's something I recommend.
Awesome. So we try to keep these to be about 45 minutes. And so we have two final questions that we always ask everybody. The first question is, what is something that you wish everybody knew related to your area of expertise? And the second question is, what's something that you wish everybody in the world knew about literally anything? It can be as silly or significant as you'd like.
Yeah, so the first, about my field, I think the misconception is that if you love animals and you work towards learning all you can about being an expert about an animal's biology and ecology, and you're a good scientist, that is going to make you a good conservation biologist. And that's simply not true. You can be the best scientist out there, an expert on jaguars, for instance. But if you have no compassion for people, no empathy, and don't understand the human connection that jaguar population has to that community, and then your conservation efforts will not go very far at all. And so to be a complete, well-rounded conservation biologist or educator, you have to definitely understand the general natural history of that animal or that population. But equally important is understanding the social issues facing the surrounding community and what it means to have a successful conservation program in that specific, unique location, and to see it from their point of view, not just the animal's point of view.
Awesome. Do you have something about not your area of expertise?
Let's see. That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, literally, I mean, my mind continues to be blown that nature is everywhere, and how diverse the scientist field are. We have people from all backgrounds and majors, and how important it is for all those disciplines to come together to make something successful. So to make a museum function, for instance, our operations staff, our custodial staff, our educator staff, our scientists are all integral, and marketing department is all integral for us to be successful at having a far-reaching institution that reaches people of all backgrounds, collects interesting data, asks interesting research questions that are relevant to the community, and make sure that it's told, the stories that we tell are told in a very strategic and compassionate way. And I think that's something I'm learning. I continue to learn on a regular basis how to make what I do more accessible. And that's something that's really inspiring to me, is always being able to learn something new at a museum, at a place like a museum.
That's great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have anything else that you'd like to plug, places we can find you on social media, anything like that?
Yeah, please, again, try and participate in the City Nature Challenge. Please visit our NHM Connects webpage. a online resource for educators out there who need some extra curriculum and content for their students or families at home. And we have a lot of great resources like virtual tours of our halls, different community science projects people can do at home. And it's a really fun page. And I really encourage you to visit us. And if you want to learn more about bats and community science, please contact us, nature@nhm.org. Follow us at NHMLA. We always post really cool stories and programs we have to offer. And stay safe during the pandemic. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Well, thank you for being with us today. Erin, thank you for signing for us. We are back on Wednesday talking about ancient maritime societies, again from the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles. So join us for that same time as today, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. We are a nonprofit organization, and so please support us if you can. We're totally donor supported and a pretty small organization for all the punch that we pack, as you might say. You can do that at patreon.com/SkypeAScientist or paypal.me/SkypeAScientist. Thanks again for being with us, and we'll see you Wednesday. Bye.